যে আনিল প্রেমাতন পরম কাছো
Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Rama Janki Rama, Rama Janki Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Rama Rama Hare. Divine grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Acharya of ISKCON Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैता गदाधर शिवाशदि गौर भक्तवृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की जय। ब्रजभूमि वृंदावन धाम की जय। मायापुर नवदीप धाम की जय। जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय। गंगा देवी जमुना देवी भक्ति देवी श्रीमती तुलसी महारानी की जय। हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय। श्री श्री राधा नीला माधव की जय। श्री श्री राधा कलाचंद जी की जय। श्री श्री राधा दामोदर जी की जय। श्री श्री राधा गिरिधारी की जय। श्री श्री गिरिराज गोवर्धन की जय। श्री श्री गौरनिताय की जय। गौर भक्तविंद की जय। गौर प्रेमानंदी His Holiness Satsvarupa Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Gauр Premanandi. All glories to assemble devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to assemble devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to assemble devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to let us of Sri Guru and Gauranga. Hare Hare. Shri Tamal Krishna Goswami ki jai. Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Krishnaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Namaste Saraswati Deve Gautam Pacharine Vishesha Sundare Vistitare. My name is Satsvarupa Maharaj. I introduce myself because many of you may not know me. I also, as I look at your faces, do not know many of you because I have not been here for many years. My immediate reason for coming was an invitation from Guru Bhakti Prabhu to attend the Houston fair, where
I'm going to be able to read for about 20 minutes or so at the festival site. But also, I wish to come to give my support, my belated support, to the followers of Srila Tamal Krishna Goswami who are serving him in separation. And also because I heard of the good reputation of Krishna Prasad in Houston, which I have already tasted. I'm sorry that this trip I'm not able to go to Dallas and see Chanji because my health is not very good. And I'm making what for me is an unprecedented tour of several places. And we've come this far. Next time I'll come to Dallas too. I have a history with both Houston and Dallas, and with Srila Tamal Krishna Goswami. I'd like to talk a little bit about my friendship with him. But first, discuss it on the broader philosophical basis. Right now, I have a more immediate emotional relationship about the departure of the spiritual master from his disciples of Bhaktivedanta Maharaj. Before coming here, I visited him in Washington, D.C. And since visiting him, I've regularly talked with him on the telephone and exchanged emails. He is definitely about to leave his body, only by some medically incredible medical defying fact is he still alive, but his spiritual, what he calls stubbornness, is keeping him in this world because he knows he's doing good by remaining in this world. But his disciples are getting a lot of opportunity over a long period of time to receive instructions about what to do after he's gone. They're getting a lot of opportunity to see him go day by day, drop by drop. It doesn't mean it won't be a shock, perhaps as much of a shock as it was to you when you suddenly heard that Tamal Krishna, in perfect health, suddenly was gone. But I think there will be a difference. But one thing he told them was that if they really loved him, the best way to do it was not individually, but to do it in community. And here you have very community-based seva and love for your spiritual master, TKG. And so he did train you, not with the idea that he was about to die, although you too, so many death-defying near-death experiences with him before his sudden death through his different cancer operations when he almost left his body. So the philosophical point, the practical point he did impress upon you is that while well and alive or and gone from the body, is to serve in cooperation. That's what Srila Prabhupada said near the end of his days. Your love for me will be shown by how you cooperate to maintain this institution after I am gone. That's a direct quote. Remember Tamal Krishna was saying in his very competitive way that we're all trying to catch Prabhupada's eye. We sometimes say so-and-so is the apple of the teacher's eye. And he outright said, because he saw, on an occasion he said this, our library party was doing well. And of course his Radha Damodar party was doing well. And he noticed that we were getting attention in the Sankirtan newsletter, which was being read to Prabhupada, and of course his party was doing well. And he said, isn't it true that we're all trying to catch Prabhupada's eye, like little children? Look, see what I'm doing, see what I'm doing. And Prabhupada actually encouraged that, called the transcendental competition. And Tamal Krishna was very eager to always do something to remain Prabhupada's eye. And in his heart. And he did it not by any trickery, but by a lifetime of dedicated service. You have, I've read your little book, TKG Memoirs, and I see there were many of them. You've candidly recorded moments that were not so sweet, that don't even have a purport except that it was something horrific. It almost took you out of your body when he buzzed his famous buzzer in Dallas, and somebody went in and was told, are you trying to kill your spiritual master by putting some foreign object in this prasadam? You fool, do this, do that, do this, do that, until they work hard, as he was working hard. So I'll try to tell some memories that I have with him that are not just idealistic too. But I must say that my relationship with him was mostly sweet, probably because I never worked under him. I was too thin-skinned for that, and too independent. But we had a very nice friendship, sometimes very close, which was kind of independent of his management with other persons. I'll talk a little of that, and then what I mainly have come to do is to read, because I'm a writer. Saturday, my little spot, and then Sunday I'm going to read out at the site at some place. And I'm going to read a little bit tonight, but first I want to speak some of my memories, just as they come to mind. I haven't written them down except as they're in my heart. I remember the first time I met Tamal Krishna Maharaj. He was, I was an East Coast devotee, joining the 26th Second Avenue. He joined on the West Coast. So after his initial great, he certainly caught Prabhupada's eye right away by such a starting of Sankirtan and vigorous opening of the temple in Los Angeles and San Francisco. Then he got the call to go to London and help build the temple there. So to go to London, he came through Boston, where I was the temple president. And I think his main attraction in stopping in Boston was to see Brahmananda, who was the big boss. And he had a press in Boston, and he was attracted to Brahmananda's managerial skills. I just saw Brahmananda wrote something. It was in your book. You referred to BTG, the management team of Ramananda, Tamal, and Gargamuni. It took place by conference calls from the East Coast to the West Coast. They were a real heavy trio, and we stayed away from that. So when the T of the BTG came to the East Coast, we mainly gravitated toward the big B. And but I was pleased to meet him, and I was a temple president, a little bit in the shadow of Brahmananda, who also resided in Boston some of the time because the press was there. But I found him a very wonderful gentleman, and I was very impressed with him. And he was very gracious to me, and he was like larger than life. I was so happy that he was a member of the Krishna Consciousness movement. I remember feeling about that also towards Jayadvaita. He was part of the Boston temple, and we would have sometimes, we would go around in a circle on our Ishtagostis and have debates, and he would always defeat everyone in debate. And I was so happy that he was on our side, meaning that he was a devotee, so he could defeat anybody's argument. So I was so happy to see that Tamal Krishna Goswami was a devotee. But he came, and I was very rules and regulations conscious with how I ran the temple there. Do everything at the same time. And so we would go out on Sankirtan at night. So Tamal Krishna Raj was just visiting there, and he said, I've got a wonderful film of Prabhupada at Rathayatra that a devotee made. And in this film, he actually jumps up and down on the cart, and he's throwing the flowers. So the devotees don't have to go out on Sankirtan tonight. We're going to watch this movie. And I said, no way, we have to go out. We go out every night, and this is our schedule. We have to collect money. He said, oh, come on, don't be so stiff. The devotees have to have some nectar. Not that every time you have to follow the schedule. So I was really opposed to this idea. I was so rigid. And he was so gracious toward the devotees, saying, they're not just robots that you have to send them out all the time. I've come here and I've got this wonderful film. Let's break the rules and they can all stay back and watch the movie. What do the devotees think? Yeah, we want to see the movie. And they heard that they got this movie. So I learned the lesson. And they said, well, okay, we'll stay back and watch the movie. And it was a wonderful movie with Prabhupada jumping up and down. And all the devotees were so happy to take this break in our routine and dive into the nectar of Prabhupada's feet. So he says, now what do you think? You think that was a better thing to do? Break the routine that way? He said, yes. You had the right idea. He said, you can make more money the next time. Because the devotees are enthused. Then he left, and I wrote a letter to Prabhupada in London about what a wonderful devotee I met in Tamal Krishna Goswami, that he came through. And Prabhupada wrote me back and he said, yes, this is the Vaishnava spirit, to praise other devotees. And yes, he is a wonderful devotee. So then he was on to London. I stayed in Boston. I was, he wrote a book, You Cannot Leave Boston. I was posted to leave there. Even my right-hand man, Giriraj, was sent to India, but I stayed in Boston. So Tamal Krishna Raj went from London, then off to India. And I next saw him again in India. In 1973, I spent a month with Prabhupada. The GBC men revolved to being with him a month at a time. At that time, Prabhupada was in Mayapur, so I didn't see Tamal Krishna Maharaj because he was in Bombay. And so I had a wonderful time with Prabhupada in Mayapur, nice personal adventures. But then my plane was back through Bombay, and I saw TKG, and he was the general, he was the GBC of India for 4 years. And that was, to be the GBC in some place in the United States was so comfortable compared to what it was in India. There were so many austerities, they had no facilities. And actually they had Prabhupada breathing down their back to count every pice and to see whether what they did was right or wrong. I'll tell more about that later. But this time in 73, when I stopped in Bombay, just for a few days to get my plane back to the United States, he welcomed me, but so royally and happily. They were living in a tent, or a tent-like building. They had no facilities, no temple at all. They had a property for which the temple was built, but the main fight hadn't even begun yet, but they were just living in very austere conditions. But he made me, or had the devotees make me halava, such an extravagant meal. And he was happy to see me. He had somebody drive me around in a jeep, and was talking Krishna Consciousness with me, and Giriraj also. And they were just so sweet with me. Like, they didn't get me involved, and they were involved in so many politics and fights with the municipality and everything. But they just told me a little bit of that, but mainly they were just heaping nectar of Vaishnava association on me and asking me, what about Prabhupada? What was he doing in Mayapur? In Mayapur? How was it and how are you? And it was like a model of Vaishnava association that they gave me. I was so happy to be in their association. They're such friends. That's my memories. I do think like that, of meeting a friend. And okay, so the next time I met him, was as I best I remember, was the next year, 74. At that time, I came back to India, this time as Prabhupada's permanent servant. And the first place Prabhupada went to India was Vrindavan, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj was there, again, studying GBC of India. And I was a servant. I've written this in a book called Life of the Perfect Master. In the middle of the night, Prabhupada rang the bell and I went in and said, "Get me Tamal." So I went out, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj was living in a little mud hut. And I went and I got him. And I wrote in the book that I was feeling resentment that Prabhupada rings the bell, but he has nothing to say to me. just get them all. If there was something serious, it wasn't with me. It was with this important man. So he said, what does Prabhupada want? I said, I don't know. He just said to get you. So he went very self-importantly in to talk with Prabhupada, shut the door behind him. I guess I could have gone in, but I didn't feel it was my place. I sat outside. I wasn't eavesdropping. I just sat there and heard a few things. They were talking such big things, like on an equal level. I could talking like I heard Tamal Krishna Goswami saying, maybe all the temple presidents should be sannyasis, and like two equal executives talking about how ISKCON should be run. Maybe the women shouldn't live in the temples. Maybe this. And talking, and Prabhupada was like listening, bouncing ideas off Tamal Krishna Maharaj. Prabhupada couldn't sleep thinking about ISKCON, and he was called in his GBC general talking all different things about ISKCON. And then Tamal Krishna Maharaj came out and just walked past me and went back to his place. Oh, I was just burning in envy. All I do is hold the cartels, and carry Prabhupada's eyeglasses behind him and go. But then I worried and envied about that. But then by morning time I thought, well, wait a minute. Tamal Krishna Maharaj, or anybody else, he may be prominent when Prabhupada is in a certain place, but I get to be wherever Prabhupada is. I follow him as long as I'm content with holding the eyeglasses and carrying the cartel. I'll always be with Prabhupada. Nevertheless, I still have doubts about not being an active preacher, and I was a little dissatisfied with my position. So in Bombay one time, Prabhupada, he lived in an apartment, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj, as GBC, lived in a straw hut. So to bathe, I had to go down to that straw hut, and you bathe out of a big tank, just pour the water over yourself. So I was taking a bath down there, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj was in there. So I told him about my doubts about my service, that it was so routine and medium. He said, no, don't think like that. He said, you're the best position in the world. You're like Govinda, Prabhupada's Mahaprabhu's servant. Who was with him? I said, yeah, you're right. And he was in there, but he had a visitor from America, Vishnu Janaswami. And Vishnu Janaswami had come to India to capture Tamal Krishna Maharaj and take him to quit GBC and come to America and go on his buses and start what would be the Radha bus. So he was telling me to keep my job, but he was conspiring to resign from GBC. We were both standing outside the shack talking, and Prabhupada came out in his veranda of his apartment, and he saw us. So then I walked back to the apartment, because I lived with Prabhupada, just in a little cramped space out on the veranda where I had my mosquito net. And Prabhupada said, what were you and Tamal Krishna Maharaj doing? I said, we were talking. He said, talking about what? I said, we were just making plans. He says, I don't know what he said, but he said, plan making. No good. And then Tamal Krishna Maharaj went to Prabhupada and broke the news. He said, Prabhupada, I've been GBC for 4 years, and it's been very hard on me. And Vishnu Jan Maharaj is here, and he wants to take me to America to go on the buses. So that, I'll give you a detail of what it was like to be GBC in India. In America, you'd have like a base and an office and telephones and a secretary and and independent money and a car. He had none of those things. He could just set up somewhere wherever he could without any facilities like a telephone or anything. But in Calcutta temple, if you know the Albert Street temple, there are the deities, then there's a long breezeway. It's a very nice breezeway with iron gates, and then there's Prabhupada's room. So Tamal Krishna once attempted to make a little tiny foothold of an office in that breezeway. He put up half a little sheet of a wall and a desk there. So he just did it without asking Prabhupada about it. That was his GBC office. A little sanctified spot where he could do some business. He was managing a vast area, and he wanted to put a telephone there and just sit calmly and do some things, interview people and everything. So one time Prabhupada went his usual route from the temple room to his room. He said, "What is this?" I don't think Tamal was there. And he said, "Oh, that's Tamal Krishna Raj's GBC office. Dismantle it at once." And they wouldn't even let him off. But Tamal Krishna Raj put his foot down and said, and Prabhupada knew in his heart that he had done enough, and that it would be good preaching in America for him to go and start the buses. He knew that when enough was enough. But then he let him go. But then he said to me later privately, he said, so Tamal Krishna Raj gets to go to America. He said, but who's going to manage India now? I said, I have to manage India. I have to become the GBC. So he became the GBC himself. But nobody begrudged Goswami. And later when Prabhupada saw what he did, he was very, very pleased that he had to push to get his way. But then he became the apple of Prabhupada's eye again by making those glorious, he turned into what, 6 very young buses. And Prabhupada was very pleased with him. But he really pushed with thin eyes to the man to resign. I don't want to take up too much time, but I remember a time when Tamal Krishna Maharaj had some trouble with the GBC. I won't try to go into all the difficulties, but details. But he was in some disfavor because he was very prominently stressing the importance of the Guru, and that after the kirtan, the Guru's name should be chanted 3 times, and all honor should be stressed to giving the Guru. This was around the time that the Gurus started acting crazy. One Guru was privately taking LSD and sitting on the Vyasasana, acting as if he was in Mahabhav. Another Guru was storing machine guns and actually using them. We don't like to tell these stories, but naturally the GBC acted on these terrible disorders and we removed those persons. So Tamal Krishna Raj didn't really do anything at all, but he was caught in this crossfire of criticism. And actually, some of you may remember, somebody was sent here in his place for a while and changed things topsy-turvy. Made all the householders split up and go out, and the husbands go out on Sankirtan, and it caused a rupture. And he said Although it only lasted a few months, he said it caused a rupture in the faith of some of his disciples. But at that time, he turned to me as a non-political friend and asked me to come down. I think it was just before the person came to take his place. Asked me to come down and be near him and be with him as a friend. So I didn't agree with the criticism toward him, and I gladly came down. And it was a different mood to be with him. And he was like a little hurt and depressed, and so I gave him my frail shoulder, and he took me in a bus. No, it was a van, like a recreational vehicle. I don't think he was driving then, but somebody else was. We went out to the farm in Oklahoma, and we had very sympathetic talks about many things. He brought me a pair of cowboy boots, and he had cowboy boots. I brought them back to Gitanagari. Every morning at Gitanagari, where I was stationed, I would go on a morning walk. It was a big thing, because I was the guru there, and all the devotees would go with me. So I had the cowboy boots hidden in the corner. I said, I can't wait to go on and walk with my cowboy boots. So the lecture program was over, and I put on my boots, and I was just going to go out the door. And this godbrother, one very comical kind of fellow, Gora Hari, his name was, looked around the corner and bulged his eyes and said, "Cowboy boots?" I said, "Do you know what they're made of?" And I said, "Oh no, leather." So then I said, "Somebody else, please get me some other boots." I changed things. I was very embarrassed. But I kept them anyway because they were a gift. TKG could do it, carry it on, but I couldn't. There are occasions when Prabhupada said we can wear leather boots. But anyway, we stayed up almost all night, and I wrote that in the letter I wrote here. And I remember we talked, and he put logs. It was a little cold. He put logs on the fireplace, and they burnt down, and we kept talking. And we stayed with him several days and gave him solace. And I continued to talk about it, and I continued to be his confidant about this issue. And then it blew over. But after that, I continued to be a close friend in that way. As I said in the beginning, I never worked under him, but I continued to be a kind of an individual friend who was always there. We sometimes in Mayapur, when aside from the business, we would chant together, just the two of us. We would chant down a long row outside. He would come over and see me, or I would go over and see him. And it got to be even better was meeting outside, the pressure of Mayapur meetings. We would go and have a meeting, and I started to make up an agenda. That was the thing. And he and I had a meeting. He said, "So what's your agenda?" And I had an agenda of about 8 points that I would write down. And he took pleasure in STG's agenda. And there would be different philosophical questions. And he would be the master who would solve all the problems in the agenda. But I would also, we would talk back and forth on some philosophical question, maybe guru and disciple question, or some issue of the day or something. And it was a great pleasure for me to make up these agendas for our private talks. But one day, as the years went by, we changed, and I changed somewhat in my outlook of things. So I realized that Tamal Krishna Raj, whenever I showed him my agendas, if it was something about myself, he would always feel free to completely change me. If there was something about me, he would correct it. I had a feeling like I was going into bringing my car in to be serviced, and he would completely change me, and then pronounce that I would be in good shape now. And I started to think, well, in general, I'm my own man more, and I shouldn't have everyone and anyone tell me what to do. I'm becoming more of an individual, and I know what I am and what I want to do. I want to follow Prabhupada, I want to follow the GBC, but I have my own inclinations more as an individual. I must convey this to Tamal Krishna Raj. That will be very important for our relationship too. So with some fear, next time we had a meeting, he was very glad to see me and said, so you have an agenda? I said, yes. But the first thing, before we speak an agenda, I want to say that I don't want you to change something about me and say that I'm wrong. He got angry right away. He said, why not? He said, if you're off the wall about something, why shouldn't I change it? I said, but I am my own person. And if I think that I have come to a conclusion about what I want to be in some area, then I don't feel it's right for you to change me. And then I gave that example like going into a shop. He said, that's completely off. He said, I have every right to change you if you are off. I said, but how do you assume that you know me better than I do and can change me? I said, I know. He said, I know you better than you do. And I can tell you what you should do. I said, I was really stubborn because I had gone over this in my mind a lot. And I said, no, I said, I want to be your friend, and I want to go over our agendas, but the first thing on the agenda is don't assume that you can just have this position of changing my whole character on any of these points. Let's just talk as two equal persons and share our opinions and disagree as we like, but don't assume that I'm completely off and that you are my mentor to completely change me and see that I'm wrong. He said, I kind of like sat back and said, well, he said, well then I guess that really changes our friendship. Because I don't see how we can have a friendship anymore. He said, we can meet occasionally. He said, but if I can't do this to you, then I don't think we can be friends. And we met for just a few more minutes, and then we didn't have a long meeting. But that's not the conclusion of my pastimes with him. It just that was a turning point. But then he kind of accepted me. Because, like you saw me again, you know Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he doesn't hold a grudge. You saw me later and he gave me that forgiving kind of smile. Like, all right, I'll accept you the way you are. Maybe a little different, But if you want to be your own man, you may miss out on some of the nectar from me. But I still love you, and I still want your company. And we did, and then, despite that rupture meeting, we still continued having our meetings. And the only thing that did cause a rupture was when I got my migraines. It was like a crisis. I broke down. It was almost simultaneous to him entering his academic career. And then he was so absorbed in Cambridge, and I was so absorbed in nervous disorder collapse that I talked to him on the phone, but he said that he couldn't come and see me. And I couldn't travel to see him. So there was a long space toward the end that he would always, when somebody went and saw him do it, he would always say, please offer my deepest respects to Satsvarupa Maharaj. And I can't visit him. And I always say the same thing to him. When I heard the news, I was the same thing with Prabhupada. At first I was just numb. And then a few days later I just broke down completely. But the Vani is the most important thing. And that's with you always. It's a very personal thing too. So I have some things to read, but if anyone has any questions or comments on what I've been talking about so far, you can ask me. Yes, everyone.
Hold on a second. We're going to get your question.
This is just a short thing because we do hope you do read.
No, it's not long.
It's fine. Just hold it real close to your mouth.
Yeah.
I don't want this to be a long thing, but I saw Baladev Vidyabhushan recently in Vrindavan, and he told a short story that you might elaborate on. It was kind of a funny story in a sense, but also he said that one time when Tamal Krishna came to Nagari, there was he had talked about how the devotees in Nexus had prepared a nice pakora with hot chilies, and so somebody at Nagari, they were growing hot chilies at the farm. So they thought, we'll surprise Tamal Krishna with these chili pakoras. And then, do you remember that story?
No.
Oh,
Tell it.
I thought you might finish it, but then he said that the devotees prepared it, but there was a certain secret of soaking the chilies in the salt water to get out the hotness. So that then they cooked it and they prepared it for him. And he assumed that it had been made like in that method. It took the heat out, and he ate a big one, and just and just like he jumped up and and then Baladev said you felt very embarrassed. Like here you came, he came and you were trying to roll out the red carpet, and so,
It was a terrible preparation. That reminds me of some other deity pastimes. And he had a sculptor here who sculpted a Lalita and Vishaka for Radha Damodar. Who was that?
Jagannath.
And they're very beautiful. They stand on either side of Damodar. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj came and they were installed. We didn't know much about them. Now there's more literature about them, but he made them as a gift. And there's the infamous story that I was the GBC for Houston. You know, there was a devotee, his name was Lakshmi Narayan. I don't know where he is now. But he was a very sweet person when he was a devotee. And I was with him. Tall, about 6'2", tall, fair devotee. And we had a very nice friendship. And we bought a building. It's gone now to ISKCON. We sent Prabhupada a picture. He said, this is a very nice picture. It looks like a secretariat building. So again, we somehow caught Prabhupada's eye with this building that you wouldn't now consider a secretariat building for ISKCON. But anyway, and before that, Vishnu Jan Swami had a wooden building that when the wind blew, it just went right through the boards. He just came here and got something for preaching. But then I came down surprised and a surprise visit. I was the GBC. Just opened the door and there he was, right in the midst of preaching to guests on Sunday program. It was so dynamic. But Dallas has come so far since when I abandoned it. And but nevertheless, it was our Dallas. And Radhakala Chanji were there, and they were like gems in the midst of a very untidy, undeveloped place. So we got the word from the north. He invaded like the Union Army into the Confederacy. We got the word. He was in St. Louis. He had St. Louis territory, and he called up and first sent one of his agents and said, "We're thinking of coming down and taking over Texas." So I just, like this intelligent general, I gave up against overwhelming forces and said, "Yes, you can have Texas." And so we packed up everything before he came, and we took little Radhakala Chanji with us. Very unorthodox thing to do. So he sat with it for about a year, and then he wrote me a letter. He said, "I realized it was a Vaishnava pastime that you took Radhakala Chanji. There was nothing wrong in it. But now, a year has passed, and I think you should return him." So I said, it's too hard for me to part with him. So I sent a check for $1,500, and I said, "Please buy another one." And he's in Vietnam. Little Radhakala Chanji is called. So I immediately surrendered to his desire to take Dallas, but didn't surrender to giving up little Radhakala Chanji.
Anyone else? Do I have a question?
But I have just a comment.
Here you go. Please speak.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. In 1987, Srila Gurudev came here and he was giving classes on Nectar of Instruction. And when the topics he was explaining about how to deal with different devotees and how to reveal one's mind. And in the classes, he gave your example that anytime, every year we get together and me and Satsvarupa Maharaj, we open our mind, reveal our mind to each other.
Mhm.
He gave that in the classes.
Oh,
I
thank
remember very well that.
That's nice. So if I'm going to read it all, I better do it now. Oh, I'm so glad to hear you say that.
But it's on tape.
Oh, I can remember. Do the memories. I can remember another fiery exchange. I had I had my headaches, you know. So they finally drove me off the BBC. The headaches were so bad. So before I actually quit, there was some committee, and that was wanting for something or other, and I said, I can't go to that committee. I have a bad headache. It hurts too much. And he said, like, you're challenging me. How bad are those headaches really? And it was really challenging. And I said, damn bad.
He said, did you accept that?
He accepted it. He was surprised at how determined I answered him. I answered him with all the force of a sufferer, that he would question my pain. My first visit to 26 Second Avenue. Whenever I try to remember my first visit to 26 Second Avenue, I first seem to recall the factual and distant things. I was alone when I entered, and the first person I talked to was Ray, later Ray Ramadas. It was the summer of 1966. I had already weathered disappointments and personal bitterness and catastrophes. I was living on my own after being discharged from the Navy. Actually, I had been living alone for almost 2 full years, and I was no longer close to Elliot or my other Lower East Side friends. I was working on East 5th Street, near the storefront, and I would pass by it on my lunch hour. And one day I saw the sign in the window for classes on Bhagavad Gita. I was interested in Eastern philosophy and religion, and the Bhagavad Gita and Upanishads were part of my eclectic reading repertoire. In those days I would read anything, but I especially liked books discussing the Buddhist or Indian path of truth. I had even read a Bhagavad Gita, although I didn't understand it. I was a shy guy trying to look hip, but I went in anyway. Being hip meant I was supposed to act cool, and like I knew how to do things. I had my life together, I thought, a job, an apartment, but I was reserved and didn't stick with any one scene. I thought any scene was not cool because it meant people getting together and being too warm or expressive and everything starting to look square and sentimental. The part of being hip was not to show only emotions. Hip meant listening to jazz and reading only certain types of books. Behind it all for me was that I was shy, looking for love, looking for God, although I didn't know it. I entered the storefront and saw a small group, already acquainted, waiting for the Swami to come down. I sat apart until someone turned to me and introduced himself. He had courage to come forward as a person. He might think that he was just acting as the Swami's, or we might think that he was just acting as the Swami's representative, but he reached across my barriers and gave me a little of his warmth, even at the risk of not looking hip. It did get through to me. My exterior shell was a thin one, and I was more inclined to see what was going to happen than to maintain my image. Then Swamiji came. If I use religious language or honorific terms to describe him, please don't mind. It was a sacred time for me. I had just met my beloved spiritual master. Someone could say, wait a minute, you're jumping the gun. You didn't consider him beloved the first time you met him. Why not give us what you felt? It doesn't matter what I felt. I'm just glad that I can now feel the emotions of gratitude and security that I went to 26 Second Avenue and met my beloved spiritual master. And the fact that this memory is true makes me feel elated. It's more important than remembering the weathered wood on the train platform of Bay Terrace, Staten Island Rapid Transit stop. What good will that image do me at the time of death? Yes, I remember the smell of country air and the innocence and goodness of those early days, but those memories will not save me at death, the way a memory of having met Prabhupada will. Meeting the Guru is a once-in-a-lifetime event. Who can estimate what it means to take up discipleship and to honor it throughout a life? I'm not a disciple of Staten Island or the memories I have of those days. I'm not even a disciple of life, per se. I am a disciple of Prabhupada, and I'm trying to serve and understand the Supreme Lord. I'm also responsible now as a father is responsible to teach Krishna Consciousness and to exemplify the practices. There is so much weight on me, but it has good fruit, all planted and nourished by that first meeting. The drama of that meeting continues as I remain attentive to carrying out its implications. So much depends on Prabhupada being true and bona fide. He's proven himself, but so much depends on it. Do you know that poem by William Carlos Williams? So much depends upon the red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens. What does he mean, so much depends? That's what he felt, that this is life. I say the same thing. So much depends on Prabhupada and his bringing Krishna consciousness to us in the West, to his being a bona fide representative of the Parampara, to our following him without deviation. So much depended on that first meeting. It was sacred. The other details I've told, how he reminded me of Buddha, how he wasn't wearing a shirt and his skin was golden brown, how it was a warm summer day, how he didn't sit on an elevated seat, but on the same straw mats on which we all sat, how he handed out cartels and asked us to sing the Hare Krishna mantra. He led the singing for half an hour, and I dug it. I couldn't understand much of what he said. His accent was so foreign to me then. After the lecture, I exchanged a few more words with Ray and went back to my Suffolk Street apartment. I became a regular at the storefront after that first night. I was young and fearful, but my going there to meet Prabhupada was an act of bravery. I was doing my own thing, and thanking God I was, because it meant rebelling against my parents' values, against the U.S. government's whole establishment. It also meant I was smoking pot. But it was the same free spirit that allowed me to drop into a Swami's storefront and chant the mantra. It didn't feel like an established religious activity, and it made me high. It was auspicious. My bad habits easily disappeared. Although I had tried at other times to give them up, I was always drawn back to them by the lack of comfort. I found in my intense life, giving up illicit sex and intoxication was one of the initial miracles I experienced. I became righteous and went forward, sober and clean as one of Swamiji's sons, a serious one. I felt strong from following him, and nothing else had ever made me feel that way. Read a poem. This is called I Know When I Walk. When I walk, ideas come, and I'm sure what I want to say to myself. I'm becoming a friend to protect my own Krishna consciousness from marauders. When I walk, fingers and toes soon get stinging cold, but I talk through a cloth mask. Hello, Haribo, good morning. How are you on February 9th? Dear heart, beating, eyes